Good evening, and welcome once again to, well, if you will, the Shadow Gallery Sabbatical Edition. I am, as of course, your host, James Donnelly, and tonight I reappear to talk about comics. But this time it is not a full-fledged comics review show. This time it is the participation of our YouTube comic book community in reviewing the issues of the Dark Phoenix Saga that Agent 42Q had put together. I had agreed to do this prior to my self-imposed exile on the YouTube community, and I'm a man of my word. So, this particular edition, we will be dealing with Uncanny X-Men number 134. And this is, of course, entitled Too Late, the Heroes. And, well, let's start off from where we left off. Now, at this point in time, I have not watched... I'm doing this on Friday night, so I have not yet watched. I've not yet watched Agent 42Q's video, and I haven't watched the most recent video, and I forgot who that was going to be by. So I've only watched to this point. I've watched Red Vitamin and Blues edition, and I've watched Sleepy Readers edition. So let's kick this one off. So in the previous issue. I'm not going to go over too much of that, just some bits, just to... Basically, it ends with the telepathic rapport that Cyclops has established with Jean Grey to kind of get into the... to get kind of into more of an offensive mode against Jason Wyngarde, against Mastermind. And there's a big swashbuckling duel, as he is kind of like this revolutionary war character of the 1700s, and Mastermind is a proper prim gentleman, and right through Cyclops's astral heart, if you will, and he groans and falls over, and everybody, the other X-Men that are there, Cyclops, Storm, and Fuzzy Elf himself, Nightcrawler, all believe that he's dead. As we open up this issue with issue 134, Too Late, the Heroes, we are now discovering that Cyclops is indeed alive, and Wolverine is still on the loose in the Hellfire Club. But of course, unfortunately, all of the other X-Men here are still subject to the whims of the Hellfire Club, in which we have, of course, we have Sebastian Shaw, we have Jason Wyngarde, we have Frost is absent in this one. We have Leland. Can't remember his last name. And we have Donald Pierce. And of course the corrupted Jean Grey, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. And, again, in Jean's mind, they're all still very peasanty of the 1700s era. And then all of a sudden, here comes Wolverine busting in, and he is ready to let all hell break loose. And, he really wants to take down Leland, because Leland was the one that basically, because Leland's whole mutant power is increasing or decreasing mass, so that's how he dropped Wolverine down into the sewers. And, of course, everybody thought he was out of the fight, which led to, that great panel at the end of issue 132. And so, and everybody's still thinking, though, that Jeannie is still playing on the Hellfire Club side. But as we see through Claremont's description of what's going on and through the various thought bubbles, we see that she has actually unlocked the ruby quartz mask, this kind of man in the iron mask faceplate that Cyclops has on his head, and he uses his optic blast to blast the thing off of his face. But of course, and that goes right into the back of Pierce's head. And of course, Cyclops, something that was really well established by Claremont is, his sense of aim, his sense of his knowledge of geometric angles and so on and so forth, so that even without his visor, he can still just open his eyes and let loose a blast that will result in something phenomenal, uncanny, if you will. And of course he does that, and he does that with Colossus and Storm and Nightcrawler, and blasts all of their chains free so that they're all loose. And everybody is running amok. And, so things really seem to be turning in the favor of the X-Men here. Cyclops blasts, instead of blasting at Shaw, because he knows that Shaw absorbs kinetic energy, as I think is constantly reminded throughout throughout every issue of this series, is we get a rundown of what everybody's individual ability is. So instead of doing that, he actually just blasts them through the floor and drops them down, and Fuzzy Elf and Aurora, Fuzzy Elf teleports down to do what he can against Shaw, leaving Colossus against Pierce. Of course, Wolverine and Leland, they're still having it out, and Jean versus Mastermind. And that's where it is the decisive moment in the fate of the X-Men forever. This is not me being hyperbolic either. And I'll tell you as I go over the events, as I kind of reach my summation here. Basically, we have, these sequences where everybody's facing off against whomever. And you have Jean alone with Mastermind, and she, because of the Phoenix Force, is so incredibly powerful now that she goes into Wyngarde's mind. And, he believes firmly that he's a dead man, that she is going to kill him. And she's got different, much darker plans for him. She uses her abilities to basically open up the mind of Wyngarde to the entire universe. So basically using her telepathy and using the Phoenix Force enhanced telepathy, which seems to have no limits whatsoever, so that he sees this, his mind is assaulted with the secrets of the universe and everything that has come, and his mind just breaks under the strain. So this is not the typical heroic move. Now, we've seen obviously some kind of anti-heroic moments from Wolverine in this very series, where he's killing members of the Hellfire Club, and because Wolverine is the best there is at what he does, and what he does isn't very nice. So this, of course, really bringing that home. But this particular assault was not meant to kill, but managed to permanently destroy the mind of Mastermind. And the thing that is so unusual about this, the thing that is the cap on this moment, is that Jean is happy that she's done this. She feels a sense of great joy at doing this, at destroying Mastermind's brain. And now, with that knowledge, knowing that she's done that, she knows now what is coming next, and that there's nothing that anybody can do to stop it. And our X-Men are making their getaway in this hovercraft they have parked not too far away from the Hellfire Club, now that all of them have been soundly trounced, for the most part, or at least have escaped. And then in this final page, it is basically a repeat of the moments that we saw in, I can't remember what issue it was. I want to say it's like issue 100 or something like that, where basically Jean has her moment of, "Hear me, X-Men. I am no longer the woman you once knew. I am now and forever. I am fire and life incarnate. Except I am Phoenix." And with that moment, she becomes Dark Phoenix and explodes the hovercraft with the X-Men inside. Now, at the time this was printed, particularly in the main Marvel universe, obviously there was some stuff that was kind of happening on the fringe. You know, you had the Punisher, but still very much an anti-hero. He was not a villain. You've never seen, at least to my recollection, there's no moment that where a hero who isn't being mentally controlled or isn't being framed or something like that overtly become a villain. This is the first time that we ever see that in, like I said, to my recollection, in Marvel history. That may be incorrect, but to have kind of, you know, I mean, Jean Grey was always admittedly kind of a second-tier player, because the men of the X-Men always seemed to have more going on. And since, of course, you know, the coming on board of all these other new mutants into the X-Men roster, it still was overwhelmingly male, but there obviously were some women on the team. But Jean had basically relegated herself, you know, basically had walked away from the X-Men, and Scott stayed. And it was all in this whole ballyhoo with the Sentinels that happened many issues previous, that Jean became Phoenix and decided to stay with the X-Men. Now, there's so many terrific moments in this issue, like, first of all, such as Psyche, again, using the optic blast to free his friends. The portent of Avengers involvement here, because there is an aside briefly in this issue that shows Hank McCoy, Beast, as an Avenger now. And this is a point in Hank's life and career as a superhero that he still is very uncomfortable with. He always feels like he's the odd man out. Because that kind of, the Beast that we've seen now, and the Beast that we've seen probably since around the, you know, mid to late 90s, is a much brainier guy. He's a much smarter guy and a much more confident hero, because he knows that he can fall back on what he has in his head. as opposed to just being this hairy beast. So you have, the kind of swashbuckling circus exploits of Nightcrawler as he's doing battle, if you will, against Sebastian Shaw, instead of basically, because again, knowing that he absorbs kinetic energy and then can redirect it, he just kind of is twirling him in a ball. And it's hilarious stuff. I mean, that's great character stuff that Claremont does here. And of course, co-plotting with Byrne. Peter's removal of Pierce's arm, and then there's that total kind of sort of fuck you moment that that Pierce has to Colossus, where even though I'm part machine, I'll still be more of a human than you are, you freak. And it's just, it's such a dickish thing to say. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's just, it's like, I mean, for a guy who spends all of his time hanging out with mutants, you'd think, that having a really kind of a strong mutant bigotry would kind of stand out amongst the Hellfire Club, but they're not really looking for, other mutants. They're looking for powerful people. And Donald Pierce is something of a powerful person. And then we have, of course, the moment in which Jean Grey ultimately becomes Dark Phoenix, because we see her torturing Mastermind, and we already have this sense that something is definitely amiss, that because he's tapped into the darkest part of her, that she knows that once she's touched that, once she's tasted that darkness within herself, that there is no real return. You can't just go back to being the good girl that you were before. And even before that, there's been these issues that they had with her, obviously, in the previous arc, where they've where they're dealing with Proteus, and they're on your island with Moira Taggart and with Banshee, and Moira's kind of running these tests on Jean, and there's just all of these crazy things that she can do, like and this other stuff that's been explored previously. I mean, just putting on a new dress, just completely rearranging her physical appearance, not physically, but just in the sense that she can just become anything and turn into anything that she wants. And all of these powers are very, very, they definitely have Moira on, they make her very nervous. And deservedly so, because of this ability, of this infinite ability that she seems to have. And so we get this moment in which, that darkest heart of her is now ingrained in her psyche, and she cannot let go of it. There's no options here. There's nothing good that she feels is left. And so when she ultimately has that reveal of that she's just broken Mastermind like a twig, not even. I mean, it's literally, kind of the boot and anthill reference. I mean, she's a huge foot on a very, very small anthill. And with the powers that she has, and she feels glee because of it. She revels in her ability to now destroy, as opposed to just create or to save lives. She's now reveling in her ability to get this done. And of course, what ultimately caused this turnaround is because of the psychic rapport that she shares with Jean, or that she shares with Cyclops, I should say. Because when he was stabbed through the heart in the astral plane, that broke Jean's psychic domination by Mastermind because of what she had just seen. She just seen the man that she loves and intends to marry, because they did kind of officially get engaged. Or, I'm sorry, no, that hasn't happened yet. Anyway. Or hasn't, see it, yeah, I kind of need to reread this whole thing. Because okay, here's the thing, is that I kind of devoted myself just to reading kind of the issue right before this, and this issue again. I mean, I've read these, a number of times. I only have it on that, that X-Men DVD, CD, whatever the hell it is that they came out with in the early part of this century, where they were just putting whole collections of issues of comics onto DVD discs, and this moment of the becoming of Dark Phoenix is, and like I said, I'm not being hyperbolic here, this is the watershed. This is the turning point for not only the X-Men and the rest of their run up through today. Something that's from, 33 years ago. And perhaps even the Marvel Universe. Because, like I said, this is really the first time that we see a hero do something overtly villainous and become a full-fledged villain. And it's such an important moment. This issue is perhaps, it's one of those issues that ranks up there with, like, for instance, the death of Elektra. As far as kind of like early X-Men, or earlier Marvels, kind of the, I shouldn't say early, but, kind of when the Bronze Age kind of gave way to the modern age. I mean, this is kind of the moment where the X-Men entered into the modern age of comics. And this is not to say that, I mean, obviously there's some little kind of nods, if you will, earlier in this arc. I mean, with like the introduction of Dazzler, the disco, the disco light show mutants. Like, when has Dazzler ever been an important part of anything? I'm sure that there are many X-Men fans out there who will, who will argue that she has been an important part. The focus light, and everything like that. That's, where Dazzler seems to, converting sound into light. It's an interesting power, but it's, it's kind of like Jubilee. She's one of those characters where it's like, Dazzler, really? Talk about doing nothing for really anything, ever. Except being another female on the team. But always being, again, relegated to kind of this weird, supporting, almost non-entity kind of character. Anyway. Of course, Claremont has been pointed out by, at the very least, I know that Sleepy Reader made a point to talk about this, is just how extremely verbose Claremont is. Now, this is something that we do not see a lot of in modern comic storytelling. We don't get the third-person narrator that much anymore. It's very, very, very rarely used. It's now mostly relegated to dialogue exchanges, or the occasional thought bubble, or the inner monologue. Aside from that, it is pretty much, it is thought to be very much a thing of the past. And there's a good reason for that. Because almost every panel of every page has words on it. It can't just be, let the picture speak for itself. It's always something, Claremont has to explain what's going on, what the person is thinking, what the action is, what the emotion should be for this moment. And that, of course, is why Claremont, while being a really good writer, he also kind of hamstrings himself when it comes to some of the bigger moments. Now, admittedly, in the kind of turning point of this issue, and again, the turning point of the Marvel Universe as a whole, in my opinion, I mean, because before this, you really had, like I said, you had, the death of Elektra by Bullseye. You had the death of Gwen Stacy and Captain Stacy. So, I mean, you have these moments, big moments, particularly Gwen Stacy, I think, was kind of like where comics kind of lost its innocence, that whole kind of run there. But with the experimentation with drugs, with Harry, and all that kind of stuff. But again, that's throwing that away. But that was where, again, Marvel Comics really kind of lost its innocence. Because, here was a love interest, a very strong love interest, and they were dead. And now here we have a hero becoming a villain. And about to do some really horrific things. And there's no coming back from that. Once you've set that table, you can't walk away from it without ever being the same. And which is why the character of Phoenix and the idea of the Phoenix Force is something that continues on and on and on and on and on from this, from this arc through all the way through, now. I mean, they're still talking about the Phoenix Force because obviously we just had Avengers versus X-Men, that horrible piece of shit. But I'm not going to get too much into that. But like I said, I mean, just the idea of the Phoenix and ultimately the Phoenix Force, because this was not something that Jean just became, as we find out much later in comics history. Not that much later. It was, I don't know, about, 6 or 7 years later that we find out a little bit more about the Phoenix Force. But, anyway, this, the expectation of Claremont is that, yes, he's going to be incredibly verbose. He's going to fill a lot of inner monologues. He's going to give us a lot of thought bubbles. He's going to give us a lot of expository dialogue because, as, again, Sleepy Reader said, he does kind of treat almost every issue like it's the first time that someone has picked up an issue of X-Men and has actually decided to read it. So, no comic is made like that anymore. No comic nowadays at all is made so that you can just kind of pick it up and read it and kind of understand what's going on without having a sense of what's come before. Which is why, they have at the beginning of every Marvel comic now, you have this kind of summary page of events, of important events that have happened recently. And, that happens a lot also in independent comics, not really DC though, and that I think is something that I think DC should really be doing, because there's a lot of information in a lot of these story arcs. So anyway, now John Byrne as an artist is someone who I've always loved. His stuff never gets old, it never gets tired, it always looks gorgeous. This issue is certainly no exception. There's some beautiful, beautiful detail that he gives to all of these characters. And, the colors, especially of this era, really pop in a way that we're not quite accustomed to, because comics in general have just become darker. And, so then the mood then is reflected through the coloring. And, no matter what color artist you are, that's going to be part of your repertoire, is that you're going to make things generally look darker unless you're doing a very light book. But this was an era which things were still very much, big yellows, big reds, big bright blues. There's a lot of that going on, that went on a lot through the 80s. and kind of really, started to drift off, after things like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns in year one, and, where things started to become grittier, darker, So, and one of the things that I love about the Hellfire Club, now, I've read a pretty good amount of X-Men in my day. I've read a lot of issues of X-Men. And this is the first time that, at least in my mind, that the Hellfire Club really ever existed. So, and you have, this very, as, other people have pointed out, this kind of, this very sexualized garments that the women wear. That they're all kind of almost bondage-esque. We very much see that with Jean, kind of her hair all done up in a, this kind of strained bun, and, with the whip and the, the cape and the black leather corset and the, like the latex, stockings or whatever the hell they put on them, is basically the reverse model of the White Queen, of course, being Emma Frost. And that is one thing that I do wish had been more explored, though, was the relationship at that time between Emma Frost and Jean Grey, because, here's the White Queen, and she's just trying to kind of gather mutants and to kind of get them to come over to the Hellfire side, and, and then here's Jean, who is, uber powerful, and is kind of, being kind of made out to be kind of the messiah, the new leader, the one that will bring the Hellfire Club to the status that they're looking for, the status of domination. And I love how he's created the soldiers of the Hellfire Club, that kind of the kind of uniforms that they all wear, is that they're all very, very similar. They're indistinguishable from one another, and that's one of the things that's so cool about them, is kind of like this face mask. It's kind of flesh colored, but there's just these slits for eyes, a slit for the mouth, and that's it. There's no personality on them. They are just like automatons. Even though they do have their individual personalities, and when they speak, they do kind of show that, but they're very lockstep with whatever the Hellfire Club needs to have done. They are the foot soldiers. They are the enforcers. And ultimately, they're protectors. And, of course, but these guys up against Wolverine didn't really stand a chance. But it was one of those designs that I've always really loved about the Hellfire Club, is that, just in comics in general, is just, how that is it's such a simple idea of just putting them in kind of like this dark blue and red, and then just giving them these flesh tones for the faces, but them being faceless at the same time. I just always thought that was really clever stuff. But again, going back to some of the underlying themes here, kind of the S&M bondage, that's a lot more covert than anything else. And this is, obviously, since it's years on, we get to explore things a little bit more in a more modern, freer sensibility than we were maybe at that time. Because, I don't think that there's a website, if Newsarama had existed, back during the run of the Dark Phoenix Saga, I don't think they would have pointed out how kind of overtly sexualized some of the women seem that are members of the Hellfire Club. It's very provocative wear. It would just be like, oh, well, did you, here's the, did you read this issue because there's a big spoiler, whatever. That's basically what it would be. It wouldn't be talking about the stuff that we talk about, the way that we talk about it now. And one of these things that I really picked up on in this series, and in this issue very specifically, because of this huge turning point, is what has been called, I don't know exactly who created this, I meant to kind of Wikipedia this, but what has been referred to as the Madonna horror complex. Now, this is something very much explored, for instance, in the works of Martin Scorsese. You know, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull. I mean, there's two men that have this I mean, in Taxi Driver, it literally is Madonna horror, and you know, because you have Sybil Shepherd, who is the Madonna, and then you have Jodie Foster, who is the horror, and then Raging Bull, you had Kathy Moriarty, which was kind of both at the same time. And here we have that same thing with Jean. Now, in the previous issue, in 133, there is this moment where basically Scott and Jean are in the afterglow of lovemaking atop a butte in Arizona, just outside of Angel's kind of new digs, where he set himself up. And, you know, you definitely know they have had sex. They're naked. You know, I mean, not, you know, showing anything, but, you know, there's no clothes. And you know that they've just made love. And basically that's where they establish the telepathic rapport. She does not want there to be secrets between the two of them, and where she's able to actually hold back his optic glass with her telekinetic powers. I mean, to concentrate on that and then all of the other stuff they were doing, that's pretty powerful stuff. And this is really one of the first times that I can think of in Marvel Comics history where a character has ever really been in kind of a post-coital moment. And so this arc and these couple of issues, they really did they paved the way for the future. And again, not hyperbole, this is literal. This was what was being, I mean, for mainstream comics, let me put it that way. Because you have, I mean, here's, you know, this kind of bondage, S&M wear, you know, sex is happening here, and, you know, something that no kid would understand, but adults were like, yeah, that's definitely, they were totally getting it on. And so, in the minds of the X-Men, Jean has always been the Madonna. And in the mind of Jason Wyngarde, and by proxy the Hellfire Club, she has become the whore. You know, she kisses, you know, Wyngarde in reality. You know, she's drawn to him because of this thrall that he starts to hold her in. And, you know, in the issue where Dazzler appears for the first time, she walks across the disco to see Jason Wyngarde there and just gives him a big fat kiss on the mouth. And, you know, this, of course, what the hell is going on to Scott? Because, again, she is not a two-timing woman. She's his girl. And yes, of course, there are some moments where even, you know, Wolverine, you know, doesn't, you know, there's some sexual attraction there, but it's still, again, very kind of covert and something that is mutual, but they know that they'll never act on it. And this is where we have, you know, again, even Wolverine not seeing her as a whore, he sees her as a Madonna, someone that can kind of soothe his raging beast, if you will, and because he is always enraged, someone that can save him. And as the being of Phoenix, she's literally someone who has saved the entire universe. But now, because of the corruption by Jason Wyngarde, she has become the whore. She has become the siphoner, if you will, a succubus, almost, if you will. And, you know, this is something that is very powerful throughout literature. you know, a woman being both creator and destroyer, you know, which is kind of how we, you know, how we fantasize, how males fantasize about women, how we want them to save us, but at the same time, we also want them to be our subordinate, our slave, our, you know, every whim that we have, they are meant to act on and to ultimately satisfy, if not just the male sex drive, at least the male ego. And that's something that I really saw for the first time when I reread this and wanted to go back and look at it, because, you know, let's face it, there's been some really good reviews here so far, and a lot of them do get into some very much larger ideas than we've ever really looked at. So that was pretty much the piece that I wanted to leave you with, to think about whether you agree or disagree. I'd like to hear from you about it, of course. But that's going to wrap up my take on X-Men issue 134. So stay tuned for, of course, the next edition, which will be coming to you tomorrow, which will be the first real full issue with the character of Dark Phoenix, with the entity, if you will, of Dark Phoenix. So strap in, because it gets really intense from here. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you happen to be maybe on iTunes, thank you for listening. If these are still even going to iTunes, no idea. But so yeah, so again, I'm James Donnelly. This has been, well, the comic book community great crossover of 2013, the exploration of the Dark Phoenix Saga. And please go watch the other videos if you haven't seen them already. If this is your first time here, subscribe. And we'll see you again, hopefully in the not too distant future. Stay in the shadows, people.